The lantern trembled in Jonah Mercer's weathered hand as he lowered it slowly to the barn floor, his breath visible in the cold New Mexico night. In the corner, pressed against the hay bales, a young Apache woman's eyes blazed with terror and defiance. She wouldn't even look at him, her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. "I won't hurt you," he whispered, his voice breaking with a grief she couldn't understand yet. "I'll wait until you're ready." Those 5 words would change everything, sparking a battle between human traffickers and a lonely rancher's desperate stand between trauma and trust, between the law that enslaved and the love that freed. Dear listeners, witness this tale of patient courage in 1878 New Mexico territory. Comment your city below. I want to know how far this story of healing travels. The wind that night carried more than just the promise of rain. It brought the sound of ragged breathing from the barn, a rhythm that didn't match any of Jonah Mercer's horses. He'd been sitting on his porch, unable to sleep again, 3 years since Martha's death. And the nights still stretched endless when he heard it. A gasp, a stifled sob. Human sounds in a place meant for animals. Jonah stood slowly, his joints protesting after hours in the cold. At 37, he felt decades older, worn down by loss and the relentless demands of running Quietwater Ranch alone. He reached for his rifle, then hesitated. Whatever was in that barn was hiding, not hunting. He took the lantern instead, keeping the wick low. The barn door creaked as he pushed it open, the sound making the breathing stop entirely. The sudden silence was more frightening than the noise had been. Jonah held the lantern at arm's length, showing his empty other hand. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said to the darkness. "My name is Jonah Mercer. This is my ranch." No response, but he could feel presence the way you could feel a storm building even when the sky looked clear. He took one step inside, then stopped. The lantern light caught the edge of torn fabric, a flash of dark hair, the white of a terrified eye. A woman, young from what he could see, native, likely Apache from the patterns on what remained of her dress, and absolutely terrified. Jonah set the lantern on the ground, then backed away slowly. "I'm going to get some food and a blanket. I'll leave them right here halfway between us. You don't have to come out. You don't have to speak. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." He left the barn, his mind racing. Apache raids had been brutal this year, but this wasn't a raider. This was someone running from something worse than territorial warfare. He gathered what he'd promised: leftover stew still warm from supper, fresh bread, a thick wool blanket that had been Martha's favorite. He added a canteen of water and returned to the barn. True to his word, he placed everything at the midpoint between the door and where he'd seen her hiding. Then he sat down just outside the barn door, his back against the frame. "I'll stay here for a while," he said to the night air, "in case you need anything, in case you want to talk, but I won't come any closer unless you ask me to." For an hour, nothing happened. Then he heard movement, careful, cautious, like a wounded animal approaching food. The sounds of eating followed, desperate but trying to be quiet. His heart ached at the combination of hunger and fear he could hear in every movement. "Tallulah." The whisper was so soft he almost missed it. "What? My name, it's Tallulah, but call me Star." "Star," he repeated gently. "That's a beautiful name. Are you hurt, Star?" A long pause. Not in ways you can fix." The weight of those words settled over him like a shroud. He understood. Some wounds didn't bleed. Martha's illness had taught him that watching her fade, unable to stop it, unable to fix what was breaking inside her body. "Would you prefer to stay in the barn tonight, or would you like to come inside? There's a guest room with a lock on the inside of the door. You'd have complete privacy." "The barn," came the immediate response. I need to be able to run." "I understand. I'll bring more blankets. It gets cold before dawn." He stood to leave, but her voice stopped him. Why aren't you asking questions? Why aren't you calling the sheriff?" Jonah turned back toward the barn, though he couldn't see her in the darkness. "Because right now you need safety more than I need answers. And as for the sheriff, Well, in my experience, the law doesn't always protect the people who need it most. He brought the blankets, leaving them in the same spot. This time he caught a glimpse of her hand as she reached for them, bruised with rope marks on the wrist. His jaw clenched, but he kept his voice steady. You can leave any time you want. The road east leads to town about 5 miles. West takes you deeper into ranch country. South is the river. North is mountains. I won't follow you, won't track you, won't tell anyone you were here if you don't want me to. You're just going to let me go. You're not mine to keep, Star. You're a person, not property, whatever anyone else might have told you. He heard her sharp intake of breath, almost a sob. How did you? The rope marks, the fear, the way you said your wounds couldn't be fixed. He paused. Someone hurt you. Someone tried to own you, but they were wrong. People can't be owned no matter what papers they might have. Silence stretched between them. Then so quietly he almost missed it. They have papers, a bill of sale, they'll come looking. The rage that flooded through him was sudden and absolute. He'd heard rumors of trafficking in the territory's native women, especially sold to brothels, or worse. But to have it confirmed, to have proof of it, sitting terrified in his barn. Let them come, he said, and something in his tone must have conveyed his seriousness, because he heard her shift, perhaps looking at him for the first time. You don't understand. They're dangerous. Buck Marlowe. He has men guns. He has legal documents. I have guns too, and as for legal documents, well, we'll see about that. Jonah stood. For tonight, just rest. Tomorrow, if you're willing, we can talk about options, but tonight, you're safe. I give you my word. He started to leave, then remembered to, oh, and Star, my dog Ash might wander in. He's old, mostly deaf and gentle as a lamb. If he bothers you, just push him away. He'll understand. The next morning, Jonah went about his chores as normally as possible, though he kept one eye on the barn. He saw no movement, but the blankets had been rearranged, formed into a kind of nest in the far corner. Good. She was making herself as comfortable as she could. He left breakfast at the halfway point: eggs, bacon biscuits with honey. This time he didn't linger, giving her space to eat it without feeling watched. When he returned an hour later, the plates were empty and neatly stacked. Thank you, came the soft voice from the shadows. You're welcome. I'm going to work with the horses now. You can watch if you want, or rest, or whatever you need. He led his newest acquisition, a skittish colt named Thunder, into the corral visible from the barn. The horse was all nerves and mistrust, probably mistreated by his previous owner. Jonah worked with infinite patience, never forcing, never rushing, just being present and consistent. You're good with him. Jonah didn't want to spook her by making direct eye contact. He's been hurt, scared. It takes time to rebuild trust. How long? As long as it takes. Days, weeks, months, doesn't matter. Healing happens on its own schedule. He heard her move closer to the barn entrance, though still in shadow. What if he never trusts again? Then I'll have done my best to show him not all humans mean harm. That's all anyone can do, be the exception to someone's fear. They stood in companionable silence, watching Thunder slowly calm under Jonah's patient hands. Finally, Star spoke again. I was taken 6 weeks ago from my village. My father tried to stop them. They shot him. My mother, I don't know what happened to my mother. Jonah's hands stilled on Thunder's neck, but he didn't turn around. I'm sorry. That's a grief no words can touch. Marlowe bought me from the raiders, has a paper saying I'm his legal property captured in legitimate warfare. Her voice turned bitter, as if there's anything legitimate about murdering families and stealing women. There isn't, and whatever papers he has, they're worthless. Slavery's been illegal since, not for Indians, not the same way. We're different. Wards of the state, property if someone claims us right. She laughed, but it was sharp, broken. I studied law books in the mission school. I know exactly how little protection the law offers people like me. Jonah finally turned, finding her standing just inside the barn door. In daylight, he could see her fully younger than he'd thought, maybe 19, with intelligent dark eyes that held too much pain for her years. Her dress was indeed torn, her hair tangled, but she held herself with a dignity that no amount of trauma could break. Then we don't rely on the law alone. We get creative. What do you mean? Before he could answer, Ash appeared, the old collie, moving slowly across the yard. The dog noticed Star and changed direction, approaching with the careful gait of an animal who'd learned to be gentle. Star tensed, but Ash simply sat at her feet, tail wagging slightly, offering companionship without demand. Slowly trembling, Star reached down and touched the dog's head. Ash leaned into her hand, and something in Star's face cracked, not breaking but opening like the first fissure in ice before spring. "I had a dog," she whispered, "before." What was its name? Smoke. He was gray like morning mist. Her hand continued stroking Ash's fur. They shot him too. Jonah's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice level. Ash here lost his brother last winter, still looks for him sometimes. Grief is something he understands. Star looked at him, then really looked at him, and he saw the question in her eyes before she asked it. "Who did you lose?" "My wife, Martha, 3 years ago, consumption." "Is that why you're helping me, because you're lonely?" The directness of it should have stung, but Jonah appreciated honesty, maybe partly, but mostly because it's right. "Because I've learned that the only way to honor the dead is to help the living." Star studied him for a long moment. "I'll stay another day, but I keep the right to leave whenever I choose." "Of course, your freedom is yours. No one can give it or take it. They can only try to make you forget you have it." That afternoon, as Jonah worked on repairing a fence, Star emerged fully from the barn for the first time. She didn't approach, just sat on a hay bale in the sun, Ash at her feet, watching the world she'd been hidden from for weeks. "Would you really wait forever?" she asked suddenly. "For thunder to trust you, for anyone to trust you?" Jonah set down his hammer, considering. "Yes, some things can't be rushed. Trust, healing, love, they grow in their own time or not at all. Trying to force them just breaks them. Love," she said it like a foreign word. "Different kinds of love. The love of friendship, the love of protection. The love that says your well-being matters to me without asking for anything in return." Star was quiet for a long time. Then, "Marlowe said he loved me. Said it while he—" She stopped, unable to continue. That wasn't love. That was possession dressed up in pretty words. Love doesn't take, it gives. It waits. It respects. "You sound very sure." "I had a good teacher. Martha never let me confuse control with care. She said real love makes you more free, not less." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Jonah saw it, dust rising from the eastern road, riders, at least 3, moving with purpose toward Quietwater Ranch. "Star," he said quietly, urgently, "we have company coming." Her face went pale, the trust they'd been building crumbling into terror. "It's them. It's Marlowe. I have to run." "No." Jonah's voice was firm but gentle. "Running now means running forever. Get inside the house. There's a root cellar with a false floor. Martha's father built it during the Apache wars. You can hide there while I handle this. You can't fight them all. I won't be alone." He whistled sharply, 3 short bursts. "That's for Tom Calder. Lives on the next ranch. Former cavalry sergeant. He'll come armed." Star hesitated, torn between flight and trust. Finally she nodded and ran for the house. Jonah watched her go, then walked to his porch, rifle in hand, but not raised, as 3 riders approached through the dying light. Buck Marlowe rode in front, a man who wore cruelty like cologne. Beside him rode 2 others, one nervous and young, constantly checking over his shoulder, the other solid and mean, with scars that told stories of violence enjoyed. "Evening, Mercer," Marlowe said, not bothering to dismount. "I'm looking for property of mine. Apache girl, about 19. Heard she might have headed this way." "No property here," Jonah replied evenly. "Just land and livestock. Don't play games. I've got legal papers, bill of sale, all proper and legal-like." Bills of sale for people aren't legal, Marlowe. Haven't been for over a decade. Marlowe's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Indian women taken in warfare aren't people under territorial law, Mercer. They're salvage. Prisoners of war at best, property at worst. I've got documents that say this one's mine. And I've got a rifle that says you should get off my land. The scarred rider started to reach for his gun but stopped as the sound of approaching hoofbeats filled the air. Tom Calder rode up, followed by 2 ranch hands, all armed. The old sergeant took in the scene with practiced ease. "Evening, Jonah. These gentlemen lost. They were just leaving Tom." Marlowe's face darkened. "This isn't over, Mercer. That girl is mine by law. I'll be back with the sheriff if I have to. You do that, and I'll be ready with some laws of my own." The riders turned and left, but not before the young nervous one looked back, something like doubt in his eyes. Jonah filed that away for later consideration. Tom dismounted, his weathered face concerned. "What's this really about? There's a young woman here who needs protection. These men claim to own her. Apache, does it matter?" Tom spat tobacco juice. "Not to me, but it will to the law. Then we need to be smarter than the law." That night, Jonah explained his plan to Star. She'd emerged from hiding once the riders were gone, shaky but determined. "There's one kind of woman the law protects absolutely in the territories: a married woman. A wife can't be property because she's already spoken for, under God and law." Star's eyes widened. "You're suggesting a legal marriage, on paper only. No expectations, no requirements, just legal protection. We could have it annulled later when you're safe, when Marlowe's given up or been dealt with." "Why would you do this?" "Because it's the right thing. Because I can't stand by and watch injustice. Because—" He paused, then continued more quietly. "Because I couldn't save Martha, but maybe I can save you." Star stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "And what would you expect in return? Men don't do something for nothing." "I expect nothing. I told you, real love, real care, it doesn't take. It gives. This would be giving you protection, nothing more. I would have control over everything. Everything. Where you sleep, what you do, when you leave, if you choose to leave. The marriage would be a legal shield, not a chain." She turned to face him, and he saw calculation in her eyes, the fierce intelligence that had helped her survive. "And if I said I'd never be a true wife, never share your bed, never give you children, never be more than a stranger under your roof, then that's what you'd be, for as long as you needed, even if that was forever. Even then." Star studied him for a long moment. "I need to think." "Of course, take all the time you—" They both heard it simultaneously. Horses moving fast, too many to count in the darkness. Not coming down the road, but across country, trying for surprise. "They're back," Star breathed, "and they brought more men." Jonah grabbed his rifle, then handed her a revolver. "You know how to use this?" "Yes." "Good. The root cellar now. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Jonah, go." She ran, and Jonah moved to the window. He could see torches now, at least a dozen riders spreading out to surround the house. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a raid. The first shot shattered the window inches from his head. Jonah dropped, returned fire, heard a curse from outside. Tom Calder burst through the back door, rifle ready. "Saw the torches from my place. Brought help." Behind him came Dr. Rosa Whitfield, the town's physician, carrying a shotgun with practiced ease. "Thought you might need medical assistance or someone to provide it to the other side." The firefight was brief but intense. Marlowe's men had expected easy prey, not a fortified position with experienced defenders. After 10 minutes and several wounded on their side, they pulled back. "Mercer," Marlowe's voice carried across the yard, "this doesn't have to be bloody. Just give me what's mine. The only thing you'll get from me is a bullet. If you step foot on my property again, you can't protect her forever. I have the law on my side, and I have something better, the truth and witnesses. Dr. Whitfield, did you see these men attack my home?" "I certainly did," Rosa called out. Unprovoked assault on a lawful citizen. That's prison time in any court. There was muttered discussion among the raiders, then the sound of retreat, but Jonah knew they'd be back. Marlowe wasn't the type to give up when he thought he owned something. Star emerged from the cellar, the revolver still in her hand. They'll come back with the sheriff next time, with writs and warrants. Then we need to move fast. Jonah turned to Rosa. Can you marry us tonight? Rosa's eyebrows rose. I'm a doctor, not a minister, but you're also a registered justice of the peace. I was at your ceremony 2 years ago. That's true, but Rosa looked between Jonah and Star, understanding dawning. A protection marriage. Clever. Will you do it? The young lady hasn't agreed, Rosa pointed out. Everyone turned to Star. She stood there, torn fabric and tangled hair, but with steel in her spine. What are the terms? Whatever you want them to be, Jonah said. We can write them into a separate document. Your autonomy protected, your freedom guaranteed. And if Marlowe challenges it, then we fight. In court, with law, with everything we have. Star looked at each of them in turn, Jonah steady and patient, Tom gruff but protective, Rosa intelligent and understanding, strangers who'd risked everything to protect her. I'll do it, but I set the terms. Of course. They performed the ceremony in Jonah's kitchen, Tom, as witness Rosa officiating. The terms were simple. Star retained all personal autonomy. Jonah provided protection and support. Either could seek annulment after 1 year, if desired. It was marriage as shield, not bond. But as Jonah spoke his vows, looking into Star's eyes, he felt something shift. This wasn't about loneliness or even justice anymore. This was about her, this fierce, wounded, incredible woman who'd survived horrors he could barely imagine. I'll wait until you're ready, he said, not part of the official vows, but necessary nonetheless. For trust, for friendship, for anything you're willing to give. And if you're never ready, that's acceptable too. Star's hand trembled in his, but her voice was steady. I accept your protection and offer my gratitude. Nothing more can I promise right now. Nothing more is needed. As Rosa pronounced them married, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Marlowe was returning, and from the size of the cloud, he'd brought an army. Star gripped Jonah's hand. Whatever happens, thank you for seeing me as human when everyone else some property. You were never property, Star. You were always human. Some folks just need reminding of that fact. The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and everyone reached for their weapons. But Star stepped forward, shoulders square, eyes clear, for the first time since she'd arrived. Let them come, she said. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm Star Mercer now, and I choose to stand my ground. The barn that wouldn't breathe that first night was silent no more. Now it echoed with defiance, with hope, with the first stirrings of something that might someday become love. But that was for tomorrow to decide. Tonight, they had a battle to win. The riders crested the hill. Marlowe at the lead, but now wearing a deputy's badge that gleamed in the moonlight. Behind him rode the sheriff himself and at least 15 armed men. Well, Tom muttered, checking his ammunition, this is about to get interesting. Star moved closer to Jonah, not in fear, but in solidarity. Together, together. The barn door banged in the wind, the sound like a heartbeat, like a promise, like the first note of a song about to begin, and somewhere in the shadows old Ash watched and waited, ready to stand guard over the woman who'd touched his head with gentle hands, the woman his master had vowed to wait for, no matter how long it took. The sheriff's boots struck the porch boards with deliberate weight, each step measured to intimidate. Sheriff Wade Curtis was a man who understood power came from fear as much as from the tin star on his chest. Behind him, Marlowe's smile spread like oil on water slick and toxic. Jonah Mercer, Curtis announced, we're here on official business. Buck Marlowe has filed a complaint about stolen property. Nothing's been stolen here, Sheriff, Jonah replied, keeping his rifle visible but not raised. Mr. Marlowe seems confused about what constitutes property. Curtis pulled out a document, the paper crackling in the night air. I have here a legal bill of sale for one Apache female, approximately 19 years of age, purchased from raiders as salvage under Territorial Code 847. That code was struck down 2 months ago, Rosa interjected, stepping forward. The territorial judge ruled it unconstitutional. In the county seat, maybe, Curtis countered, son, but out here I enforce the laws as they stand in my jurisdiction, and in my jurisdiction this document is valid. Star's hand found Jonah's arm, her fingers tight with controlled fear, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. I am not property. I am Star Mercer, legal wife of Jonah Mercer, married this very evening. The sheriff's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his weathered features. Marlowe pushed forward, face flushing red. That's impossible. She's mine. I mean, she's my legal property. Not anymore, Tom Calder said, producing the marriage certificate Rosa had signed. Legal marriage supersedes any claim of ownership, even under your outdated territorial codes. Curtis examined the document, his frown deepening. This appears to be in order, but nothing, Jonah cut in. My wife and I would like you off our property, unless you have a warrant. The sheriff's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Not yet, but marriages can be challenged if there's evidence of coercion or fraud. The only coercion here, Star said, stepping into the lamplight where everyone could see the rope marks on her wrists, came from Mr. Marlowe. Dr. Whitfield can attest to my injuries. Rosa nodded. I've documented extensive evidence of abuse. Any court would be interested to see it. Marlowe's hand drifted toward his gun, but froze as multiple rifles swung his way. The young nervous rider from earlier, whom Star now recognized as Evan Pike, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. This ain't right, boss, Pike muttered. She's married now. It's done. Shut your mouth, Pike, Marlowe snarled. You're paid to follow orders, not think. Curtis raised a hand for calm. Everyone stand down. Mercer, I'll need to verify this marriage is legitimate. I'll be back tomorrow with Judge Caro. If everything's in order, that'll be the end of it. If not, he let the threat hang. We'll be here, Jonah said firmly. As the riders prepared to leave, Marlowe spurred his horse close to the porch. This isn't over, he hissed loud enough for only Jonah and Star to hear. I don't give up what's mine. She was never yours, Jonah replied quietly. And if you come near her again without legal authority, I'll put you in the ground. Marlowe's eyes glittered with malice. We'll see about that. After they'd gone, the defenders gathered in the kitchen. Star sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee Rosa had made, the ceramic trembling slightly against her palms. They'll be back, she said. Marlowe won't accept this. He's not a man who accepts losing. Then we need to be ready, Jonah said. Tom, can you stay tonight? Already planned on it. I'll take first watch. Rosa was examining the marriage certificate, her expression thoughtful. This will hold up legally, but Marlowe's right about one thing, if they can prove coercion or that the marriage isn't genuine. They could have it annulled. What constitutes genuine? Star asked. Rosa hesitated. Typically, cohabitation, shared property, witnessed affection, the appearance of a real marriage, at least. Star and Jonah exchanged glances. We can manage appearances, Jonah said. Can you? Rosa studied them both. Star, you can barely look at him without flinching. No offense meant, but trauma doesn't hide well. Then I'll learn, Star said with sudden fierceness. I've survived worse than pretending to be married. You shouldn't have to pretend anything, Jonah said. This was meant to protect you, not create another cage. Star stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Every choice is a cage when you're Apache in white territory. At least this cage has bars I can see through. The bitterness in her voice made everyone fall silent. Finally, Tom cleared his throat. I'll go check the perimeter. Rosa gathered her medical bag. I should head back to town, see what I can learn about what Marlowe's planning. After they left, Jonah and Star were alone for the first time as husband and wife. The weight of it settled between them like a third presence. "Your room is upstairs," Jonah said. "First door on the right." It was Martha's sewing room. "I've put fresh linens on the bed." "Where will you sleep?" "Down here. The sofa's comfortable enough." Star studied him. "That's not sustainable. If they're watching, if they're looking for evidence, the marriage is false. Let me worry about that." "No." Her voice was firm. "This is my battle too now. We do this right or not at all." She moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the fear she was fighting to control. "Tomorrow, when the judge comes, we need to seem connected. Can you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "How to be married. How to act like I chose you." The vulnerability in her voice nearly broke him. "Star, you don't have to." "Yes, I do, because the alternative is going back to Marlowe and I'd rather die." She met his eyes fully for the first time since the ceremony. "So teach me, please." Jonah nodded slowly. "All right, but we go at your pace. If anything makes you uncomfortable, you say stop and we stop. No questions, no pushing." "Agreed." He held out his hand, palm up, unthreatening. "Let's start simple. Can you take my hand?" Star stared at his hand like it was a snake. Her breathing quickened, but she forced herself to reach out her fingers, barely brushing his palm before pulling back. "I'm sorry, I can't." "Don't apologize. That was brave." Jonah kept his hand extended. "Try again when you're ready. We have all night." They stood there for long minutes, Star fighting her demons, while Jonah waited with infinite patience. Finally, she placed her hand in his, letting it rest there for a full second before withdrawing. "Better," he said. "Now let's work on standing close. In public, married couples stand within each other's space." They practiced until nearly dawn, standing close, brief touches, looking at each other without fear. It was exhausting for Star, fighting against every instinct that screamed danger, but gradually, incrementally, she began to separate Jonah from the category of threat. When Tom came in from watch duty, he found them at the kitchen table, Star actually eating breakfast while sitting next to Jonah instead of across from him. "Progress?" Tom asked. "Some," Jonah replied. "Star's a quick learner." Star managed a small smile. "Survival is always about adaptation." A rider approached just after sunrise, not the sheriff's group, but a lone figure moving fast. Rosa Whitfield rode into the yard, her face grim. "News from town," she announced, dismounting quickly. "Marlowe's been spreading money around. He's hired a lawyer from Santa Fe, someone who specializes in annulments. And worse, he's got affidavits from 2 men claiming they witnessed Jonah force Star into marriage at gunpoint." "That's a lie," Star exclaimed. "Of course it is. But it's his word against ours, and he's got deeper pockets." Jonah's jaw clenched. "What do we do?" "We need witnesses of our own, people who can testify to the legitimacy of your relationship." Rosa paused. "And we need to find out what Marlowe's really after. This seems like too much trouble for one woman, no matter how much his pride is wounded." Star went very still. "There's something I haven't told you." Everyone turned to her. She took a breath, then continued. "My father wasn't just any Apache. He was a chief's son, and before he died, he told me about a treaty, a secret agreement between some Apache bands and the government about water rights. The documents were hidden, but he told me where." "Water rights." Jonah leaned forward. "That's worth a fortune out here." "That's why Marlowe wanted me specifically. He knew about my father, about the treaty. He thought he could force the information from me." "Did he?" Rosa asked gently. "No, I told him I didn't know anything. Let him think I was just another captive." Star's smile was sharp. "Men like him never expect women to have secrets worth keeping." Tom whistled low. "If Marlowe gets those documents, he could control water access for half the territory." "Which is why we can't let him win," Jonah said. He turned to Star. "Where are these documents, hidden in sacred Apache burial grounds? Only someone with tribal blood can retrieve them without violating the protection spirits. She hesitated. I could get them, but it would mean riding into Apache territory. My people, they might not welcome me back. I've been contaminated by white contact. You're not contaminated, Jonah said firmly. You're surviving. Before Star could respond, dust rose on the horizon. The sheriff was returning, and this time he'd brought what looked like half the town. Everyone remember the plan, Jonah said. We're newlyweds, happy, natural. Star moved closer to him, forcing herself to lean slightly against his arm. I can do this. The procession that arrived was impressive in its hostility. Sheriff Curtis led, followed by Judge Caro, a thin man with calculating eyes, then Marlowe with his hired guns, and surprisingly, a photographer with his equipment. What's the photographer for? Tom demanded. Documentation, the judge replied, dismounting carefully. Mr. Marlowe has requested thorough evidence of the marriage's legitimacy or lack thereof. This is harassment, Rosa protested. This is the law, Curtis countered. Judge, we're ready to proceed. Judge Caro set up his makeshift court on the porch, positioning himself in Jonah's own chair like he owned it. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, I'm here to investigate claims that your marriage was performed under duress. No duress, Star said, managing to keep her voice steady. I married Jonah of my own free will. Then you won't mind answering some questions. When did you first meet? Star's mind raced. 4 days ago, when I sought shelter here. And you married yesterday. That's quite fast. When you know, you know, Jonah interjected, placing his hand over Star's on the porch rail. She managed not to flinch. How romantic, Marlowe sneered. Tell me, Mrs. Mercer, where did you spend last night? Heat flooded Star's cheeks, but she maintained eye contact. With my husband, of course. In the same room, the same bed. That's inappropriate questioning, Rosa objected. It's pertinent to establishing the marriage's validity, the judge ruled. Answer the question. Star felt Jonah tense beside her. She squeezed his hand the first time she'd initiated contact. We spent the night together as married couples do. Prove it, Marlowe demanded. Before anyone could protest, Star turned and kissed Jonah. It was brief, barely a brush of lips, but public and undeniable. The photographer's flash powder exploded, capturing the moment. Jonah stood frozen, stunned by her courage. Star stayed close to him, though he could feel her trembling. Satisfied? She asked Marlowe, her voice like ice. But Marlowe wasn't done. I'd like to examine the marriage bed, Judge, for evidence of consummation. The crude suggestion made everyone recoil. Even some of Marlowe's own men looked uncomfortable. Evan Pike actually took a step back, disgust clear on his face. That's enough, Judge Caro said. I won't allow such invasive inspection. But, Judge, I said enough, Mr. Marlowe. The judge studied Jonah and Star. However, I am concerned about the speed of this union. I'm ordering a 30-day observation period. The marriage will be reviewed again at that time. If I find evidence of fraud or coercion, it will be annulled. 30 days. Star's voice cracked slightly. Be grateful it's not immediate annulment, the judge warned. Mr. Marlowe has presented compelling concerns. As the official party prepared to leave, Evan Pike lingered. When Marlowe wasn't looking, he approached Jonah. There's something you should know, he said quietly. Marlowe's planning something. I heard him talking about hired guns from Texas, something about water rights. Watch your back. Why are you telling me this? Pike glanced at Star. Because what he did to her, what he's trying to do, it ain't right. I got a sister her age. He mounted his horse quickly. I was never here. After everyone left, Star collapsed into a chair, shaking. Jonah knelt beside her, careful not to touch. You were incredible, he said. That kiss, I know what that cost you. It cost less than losing would, she replied. Then softer, you didn't kiss back. You surprised me, and I didn't want to take more than you were offering. She studied him. You really meant it, didn't you, about waiting forever? Every word. That night, as they prepared for bed, still in separate rooms, despite the judge's scrutiny, Star stopped at her door. Jonah, the documents my father told me about, we should get them. Before Marlowe figures out another way to get to me. That means riding into Apache territory. I know. Will you come with me? Of course. She nodded, then surprised them both by what she said next. Today, when I kissed you, for a moment, I forgot to be afraid. Before Jonah could respond, she was gone, her door closing softly. He stood in the hallway, touching his lips where hers had briefly met them, wondering if hope could grow from such rocky soil. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Change was coming, whether in weather or warfare remained to be seen. But in the house that had been empty of laughter for 3 years, something new was stirring. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, fragile as spring frost, and just as likely to vanish with the dawn. In her room, Star stood at the window watching the storm approach. Somewhere out there, Marlowe was planning his next move. But for the first time since her capture, she wasn't just running or hiding. She was choosing her ground, choosing her battle, and maybe, just maybe, choosing the man who'd promised to wait forever for her to be ready. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Star remembered her father's words. The storm doesn't ask permission to change the landscape. It simply does. Tomorrow they would ride for the burial grounds. Tonight she would try to sleep without nightmares, in a house where she was legally wife, but emotionally still finding her way from captive to free. The storm broke just after midnight, rain hammering the roof like desperate fingers. Star woke to find Ash scratching at her door. She let the old dog in, and he curled up beside her bed, a guardian against the shadows. Downstairs, she could hear Jonah moving about, probably checking windows against the rain. The sound was oddly comforting, someone watching over her who expected nothing in return. For the first time in weeks, Star fell back asleep without fear, the sound of rain and the presence of protective souls keeping the darkness at bay. But even in sleep, her hand went to the hidden knife under her pillow. Trust was growing, but survival habits died hard. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marlowe wouldn't give up. The judge would return. The Apache might reject her, or worse. But tonight she was Star Mercer, protected by law and by a man whose patience seemed infinite. The rain continued through the night, washing the dust from the ranch, from the air, from everything but memory. And in the morning, when the sun broke through the clouds, it would find them ready for whatever came next. The morning after the storm brought a clarity that made everything sharper, from the distant mountains to the tension in Star's shoulders as she chose her tasks for the day. She stood at the kitchen window watching Jonah work with Thunder in the corral and made a decision that surprised her. "I want to help with the horses," she announced, stepping onto the porch. Jonah looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. "You sure Thunder's still pretty skittish around strangers?" "I'm not a stranger anymore, am I?" The question held more weight than just about horses. He gestured for her to enter the corral, watching as Thunder immediately tensed. But Star moved differently than Jonah expected, not with the careful approach of whites, but with the fluid awareness her people had always used around horses. Thunder's ears flicked forward, curious rather than afraid. "You know horses," Jonah observed. "My father bred them before." She extended her hand, letting Thunder catch her scent. "He said horses could see into souls, know who meant harm and who offered peace." The colt stepped closer, nostrils flaring. Then, to Jonah's amazement, Thunder pressed his nose into Star's palm. "What does he see in your soul?" Jonah asked softly. Star's answer came equally quiet. "Someone who understands what it means to be broken and trying to trust again." They worked together in comfortable silence until Rosa arrived, medical bag in hand, but her purpose clearly different today. "I've brought something," she announced, producing several books from her bag. "Medical texts. I thought Star might like to learn." "Why?" Star asked, though her eyes had already fixed on the books with hungry interest. "Because knowledge is power. and because healing others sometimes helps us heal ourselves. Rosa set the books on the fence post. I could use an assistant, someone who understands pain and recovery. Star touched one of the books reverently. My mother wanted me to learn medicine. She said Apache women had been healers for generations, but the old ways were being lost. Then let's combine old ways with new, Rosa suggested. Your traditional knowledge with modern medicine. As Star opened the first book, Ash ambled over, settling at her feet with a contented sigh. The old dog had taken to following her everywhere, as if he'd appointed himself her guardian. He's never done that with anyone but Martha, Jonah said, wonder in his voice. Maybe he knows I need him, Star replied, reaching down to stroke Ash's graying head. Or maybe he needs me. Grief shared weighs less than grief carried alone. Tom Calder rode up just then, his face grim. We've got problems. Marlowe's been to the bank. He's trying to buy up the notes on surrounding ranches, including yours, Jonah. I don't have any outstanding notes, Jonah said. You sure nothing Martha might have taken out? Jonah's face paled. There was something when she was sick. Medical expenses, but I thought I'd paid it off. Better check. If Marlowe gets hold of that note, he could foreclose. Take everything, including Star. They spent the afternoon going through papers, Star helping despite the technical language being foreign to her. It was she who founded a loan document with payments made but not completed, the balance small but enough for legal action. $200, Jonah said bitterly. That's all that stands between us and losing everything. I have jewelry, Star offered. Things my mother gave me hidden when I was taken. We could sell. No, Jonah's voice was firm. Those are yours, your connection to your family. We'll find another way. But as evening approached, that way seemed increasingly elusive. The bank was closed until Monday, giving Marlowe 2 days to maneuver. They were discussing options when Ashi suddenly stood, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Someone's coming, Star said, already moving toward the rifle rack. But instead of Marlowe's men, a lone Apache warrior rode into view, hands raised in peace. Star gasped, recognizing him. Naichi, my cousin. She ran toward him, speaking rapid Apache. Jonah couldn't understand the words, but he could read the emotion. Joy, sorrow, guilt, relief, all mingled. The warrior dismounted, embracing Star briefly before pulling back to study her with dark, judgmental eyes. You've taken a white husband, Naichi said, in accented English, clearly meant for Jonah to hear. For protection, Star replied. The man who claimed to own me. We know of Marlowe. He's made offers to other bands trying to buy Apache women. Naichi's expression darkened. Some have been tempted by his gold. That's why you're here. Partly. And partly because your father's spirit is restless. The sacred documents, they must be moved. White men have been searching the old places. Star translated for Jonah, then added, we were planning to retrieve them anyway. Naichi studied Jonah with the same intensity Thunder had shown earlier. This white man, you trust him. I'm learning too, Star admitted. Learning is not knowing. It's enough for now. Naichi nodded slowly. We leave at dawn, bring only what's necessary, and the white man comes alone, no other whites. After Naichi left to camp nearby, Jonah found Star sitting with Ash, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? He said my father's spirit is restless. In our beliefs, that means he can't find peace until his death is avenged or his mission completed. She wiped her eyes. I've failed him in both. You've survived, Jonah said, sitting beside her but maintaining careful distance. That's not failure. Survival without purpose is just extended dying. Then let's give it purpose. Get those documents. Use them to protect not just water rights, but your people's future. Star looked at him, then really looked at him, and for the first time since her arrival, he saw past the fear to the woman beneath. Intelligent, fierce, wounded, but not broken. Why do you care so much? Really? Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Because when Martha was dying, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let my death make you stop living. Find someone to save, someone to protect. Love again, even if it hurts." And you think I'm someone to save? No, I think you're someone who's already saving herself. I'm just trying to help where I can. Star moved slightly closer, though still not touching. Martha was lucky to have you. I was lucky to have her, and now, he paused, choosing words carefully. Now I'm lucky to know you. That night, Star couldn't sleep. She found herself in the barn where this had all started, Ash faithfully beside her. The space that had been her refuge now felt different, less hiding place, more beginning point. She was startled when Jonah appeared with a lantern and blankets. Couldn't sleep either. Too much to think about. He sat on a hay bale, the lantern between them, creating a circle of warm light. Are you afraid about tomorrow? Yes, but not of what you might think. I'm afraid my people will reject me, that I've become too white to be Apache. You're still you. No one can take that away. Marlowe tried and failed. You're here, you're free, you're choosing your own path. Star stood and walked to the barn door, looking out at the star-filled sky. My grandmother once told me that stars don't choose to shine, they just do because it's their nature. Maybe that's where your name comes from, your nature to shine even in darkness. She turned to face him, and in the lantern light, Jonah saw something shift in her expression. I want to tell you something about what Marlowe did. You don't have to. I need to, because keeping it inside is killing me slowly. She took a breath. He didn't just try to own my body. He tried to own my mind, made me repeat things, say things, made me thank him for... She couldn't continue. Jonah's hands clenched, but he kept his voice gentle. None of that was your fault. Surviving however you had to, that's strength, not weakness. I feel weak, broken, dirty. You're none of those things. You're wounded, yes, but wounds heal, and you're the furthest thing from dirty I've ever seen. You're your pure courage wrapped in human form. Star studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised them both. She walked over and sat beside him on the hay bale, not touching, but closer than she'd voluntarily been to any man since her capture. Tell me about Martha, the real things, not just the sadness. So he did. He talked about her laugh, her terrible cooking, her way of seeing good in everyone. How she'd sing to the horses, argue with the chickens, dance in the rain. Star listened occasionally, smiling, sometimes asking questions. She sounds wonderful. She was. Different from you, but wonderful. Different how? Jonah considered. Martha was like spring rain, gentle, nurturing, predictable in the best way. You're like lightning, powerful, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. Lightning destroys things. It also illuminates, shows truth in sharp relief. They sat in comfortable silence until Ash suddenly whined. His breathing labored. The old dog was struggling to stand, his back legs not responding properly. Ash. Star dropped to her knees beside him, her hands running over his body, checking for injury. Jonah, something's wrong. Jonah knelt beside her, his face grave as he examined his old friend. He's had these spells before. Rosa says it's his heart, old age catching up. Can we help him? We can make him comfortable, be with him. They spent the rest of the night on the barn floor, Ash's head in Star's lap, while Jonah stroked his fur. The dog's breathing gradually steadied but remained shallow. He's fighting, Star observed. He's stubborn, always has been, like his master. As dawn approached, Ash seemed to rally. He even managed to lick Star's hand, his tail giving a weak wag, but they both knew time was running short. We should postpone the trip, Jonah said. No, Ash would want us to go, to finish what we started. Star gently settled the dog on a bed of blankets. Tom can watch him. When Naichi arrived, he took in the scene, the dying dog, the two people keeping vigil, and his expression softened slightly. The spirit of that animal is strong. He guards what he loves. Yes, Star said simply. They prepared to leave, but Star kept looking back at the barn. Finally, she ran back, kneeling beside Ash one more time. "Thank you," she whispered in Apache, "for showing me that trust is possible, for being my first friend here." Ash's tail thumped once, and Star had to force herself to leave. The ride toward Apache territory was tense, each of them lost in their own thoughts. They'd gone about 10 miles when Tom Calder caught up riding hard. "Ash?" Jonah asked immediately, still hanging on. "But that's not why I'm here." Tom was breathless. "Marlowe's made his move. He's got a federal marshal with him, claims you kidnapped Star, that the marriage is invalid. They're heading for your ranch now." "Federal marshal?" Star's face paled. "That's outside local jurisdiction." "Exactly. Marlowe's calling in bigger guns." Naichi spoke rapidly in Apache to Star, then switched to English. "We continue. Get documents. They prove more than water rights. They prove government corruption, leverage against those who would harm you." "But if they take the ranch while we're gone," Jonah started, "Rosa's there with some town folks who support you. They won't let anything happen without a fight." They had to choose, turn back and face whatever Marlowe had orchestrated, or continue and retrieve the one thing that might give them real power. Star made the decision. "We go forward. Ash taught me something last night. Sometimes you have to trust that those who love you will guard what matters while you do what's necessary." They rode harder now, urgency driving them. The landscape changed, becoming rougher, more isolated. Jonah noticed Apache scouts shadowing them, maintaining distance but clearly tracking their progress. "Your people don't trust me," he observed to Star. "They don't trust any white man, but Naichi's presence keeps you safe." They reached the burial grounds as the sun peaked overhead. The area was sacred, marked by painted stones and symbols Jonah couldn't read. Star dismounted, but when Jonah moved to follow, Naichi stopped him. "Only Apache blood enters here." "It's all right," Star assured Jonah. "I won't be long." She disappeared among the rocks, leaving Jonah and Naichi in awkward silence. Finally, the warrior spoke. "You care for her?" It wasn't a question, but Jonah answered anyway. "Yes." "As a possession or as a person?" "As a person, always as a person. Many white men say this. Few mean it. I'm not many white men." Naichi studied him. "No, perhaps you're not." A scream pierced the air, Star's voice terrified and pain-filled. Both men ran toward the sound, sacred ground or not. They found her at the base of a small cliff, her ankle twisted at an unnatural angle, her face pale with shock. "The ledge gave way," she gasped. "But I got them." She held up a leather pouch, old and worn but intact. Inside were documents yellowed with age but still readable. Jonah knelt beside her, gently examining her ankle. "It's broken. We need to set it." "No time," Star insisted through gritted teeth. "Marlowe's men, they'll come here once they realize we're gone. Then we move fast." Jonah looked at Naichi. "I need 2 straight branches and strips of cloth." While Naichi gathered materials, Jonah held Star's hand. "This is going to hurt." "I've had worse. That doesn't make this easier." "No, but you being here does." He looked into her eyes, saw trust beginning to bloom there, despite everything. "On 3, 1, 2. He set the bone on 2. Star's scream echoed off the rocks, but she didn't pass out. Tears streamed down her face as Jonah splinted the ankle with practiced efficiency. "You've done this before," she observed through her pain. "Ranch life teaches many skills." Naichi returned with horses. "Riders coming, many. We must go." Jonah lifted Star onto his horse, mounting behind her to hold her steady. She leaned back against him, necessity overcoming fear, and he felt her trembling. "I've got you," he murmured. "I know," she replied, and for the first time she meant it. They rode hard, despite Star's injury, taking paths Naichi knew that would confuse pursuers. Behind them, dust clouds showed their hunters were gaining. "There," Naichi pointed to a box canyon. "We make our stand there." "That's a dead end," Jonah protested. "That's a sacred place. They won't follow." But as they entered the canyon, Jonah realized the truth. Marlowe's men might not follow, but Marlowe himself would. The man had no respect for anything sacred except money. They positioned themselves behind rocks, weapons ready. Star, despite her pain, held a rifle steadily. "Whatever happens," she said to Jonah, "thank you for seeing me as human, for waiting, for everything. Don't talk like we're saying goodbye." "Aren't we? There's 20 of them, 3 of us." "4, came a new voice. Evan Pike emerged from behind a boulder, rifle in hand. "Came to warn you, Marlowe's lost his mind. He's planning to kill everyone, blame it on Apache raiders." "Why should we trust you?" Nietzsche demanded. "Because I'm done being part of something evil." Pike positioned himself beside them. "And because Star reminds me of my sister, too strong to be broken, too valuable to be owned." The riders appeared at the canyon mouth. Marlowe led them, his face twisted with rage. Beside him rode a man in a federal marshal's badge, but something about him seemed off. "That's no real marshal," Pike said. "That's Marlowe's cousin from Texas. The badge is stolen." "Give me the woman and the documents," Marlowe shouted, "or we'll take them from your corpses." "Come and try," Jonah shouted back. The firefight erupted suddenly, viciously. Bullets whined off rocks, dust, and gun smoke filling the air. Star, despite her broken ankle, proved to be an excellent shot, her rifle speaking with deadly accuracy. But they were outnumbered. Just as their ammunition ran low, just as it seemed they'd be overrun, a new sound filled the canyon. Apache war cries from all directions. Warriors appeared on the canyon walls, arrows and rifles trained on Marlowe's men. Nietzsche had called his people, and they'd answered. "White men," an Apache chief called out, "you trespass on sacred ground. Leave now or feed the vultures." Most of Marlowe's hired guns fled immediately, but Marlowe himself, consumed by rage, charged forward alone, pistol aimed at Star. 3 things happened simultaneously. Jonah stepped in front of Star, Evan Pike's rifle cracked, and an Apache arrow sang through the air. Marlowe tumbled from his horse, Pike's bullet in his shoulder, the arrow in his thigh. The false marshal tried to run, but was quickly captured by Apache warriors. The remaining thugs scattered like quail. As the dust settled, Star gripped Jonah's arm. "You stepped in front of me. You were willing to die for me." "Yes." "Why? Because that's what you do for people you love." The word hung between them, powerful and unexpected. Star's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Nietzsche approached. "The documents," he said. "Let me see them." Star handed over the pouch. Nietzsche examined the papers, his expression growing more serious with each page. "These prove the government has been systematically stealing Apache water rights, selling them to ranchers and railroad companies." He looked at Jonah. "Including some sales to your neighbors." "But not to me," Jonah said firmly. "No, your ranch's water rights are clean, but others—" He showed them a map. Marlowe was trying to consolidate stolen rights to control the entire valley's water. "We need to get these to proper authorities," Star said. "Real federal marshals, journalists, anyone who can expose this." "First, we need to get you to a doctor," Jonah insisted. "That ankle needs proper treatment." As they prepared to leave, the Apache chief approached Star. "Daughter, you've been touched by white hands, lived in white houses. Some say you're no longer Apache." Star lifted her chin. "I am what I've always been, a survivor, a bridge between worlds. Apache blood runs in my veins, regardless of where I've walked." The chief nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud. His spirit can rest now. His mission is complete." As they rode out of the canyon, Marlowe being dragged behind a horse with his wounds bandaged but his pride shattered. Star leaned back against Jonah again. This time it wasn't from necessity but from choice. "You said you love me," she said quietly. "I did. I do, but that doesn't obligate you to anything." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not ready to say it back. I may never be. That's okay. But I want you to know. I'm starting to see why Martha loved you." You're patient and strong, and you see people for who they really are, not what the world tells you they should be. That's quite a compliment. It's the truth. And Jonah, when this is over, when we're safe, I'd like to learn what it means to be married. Really married, not just on paper. We have time, he assured her. All the time you need. As they crested the hill overlooking Quietwater Ranch, they could see a crowd gathered in the yard. Rosa was there along with Tom and many townspeople. Even Judge Caro was present, looking stern but interested. But it was the small form of Ash lying on a blanket on the porch that drew Star's attention. He's still alive. They rode in quickly, Star ignoring her pain to hobble to the old dog's side. Ash's tail wagged weakly, his eyes finding hers with obvious joy. He was waiting, Rosa said softly. Wouldn't let go until you came back. Star buried her face in Ash's fur, whispering thanks and farewells in Apache and English. The old dog licked her hand once more, then closed his eyes with a contented sigh. He passed as the sun set, surrounded by people who loved him, having completed his final duty, seeing his humans safe and together. They buried Ash beneath the oak tree as the morning sun painted the ranch gold stars, Apache death song, mingling with Jonah's quiet prayers. The crowd from yesterday had dispersed, but Judge Caro remained, his presence a reminder that the 30-day observation period continued despite Marlowe's capture. These documents change things, the judge said, examining the papers Star had retrieved. If they're authentic, half the territorial government could face charges. They're real, Star insisted from where Rosa was properly splinting her ankle. My father died protecting them. Which is why certain people won't want them to see daylight, Caro warned. Marlowe may be in custody, but his associates have deeper pockets and longer reaches. Tom Calder spat tobacco juice. Let them reach. They'll pull back stumps. But Star noticed something in the judge's expression, a nervousness that hadn't been there before. You know something. What aren't you telling us? Caro hesitated, then pulled out a telegram. This came this morning. The territorial governor is sending an inspection team. They'll be here by sunset. Inspection for what? Jonah demanded. To verify the marriage's legitimacy, investigate claims of harboring fugitives, and, he paused, to search for stolen government documents. But we just proved these documents expose government corruption, Rosa protested, which is exactly why they want them back. Caro stood to leave. I'd hide those papers well, Mr. Mercer, and Mrs. Mercer, I'd suggest you present yourself as the devoted wife you claim to be. These inspectors won't be as easily satisfied as I was. After he left, Star struggled to stand despite her injury. We need to prepare. This isn't just about us anymore. Those documents could free my people from decades of theft. Jonah steadied her. First, we hide the papers. Then, we make this ranch defensible. They worked through the morning, creating false caches and decoys. The real documents went into a hidden compartment Martha's father had built in the barn's foundation, sealed with fresh mortar that Tom aged with dust and cobwebs. Star, despite her broken ankle, insisted on helping. She directed from a chair as Jonah and Tom set up defensive positions, not obvious fortifications that would suggest guilt, but subtle advantages. Tripwires connected to bells in the chicken coop, a mirror system that would let them see around corners, boxes of ammunition hidden in strategic locations. You're thinking like a warrior, Evan Pike observed. He'd stayed after the canyon fight, determined to make amends for his time with Marlowe. I'm thinking like someone who's been hunted, Star corrected. There's a difference. Rosa arrived with medical supplies and news. The inspection team isn't coming alone. They've requisitioned a cavalry unit from Fort Stanton. How many soldiers? Tom asked. 20, maybe 30, too many to fight. Then we don't fight, Star said. We follow the law to the letter. Give them nothing to use against us. Jonah knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. The gesture was both performance and genuine. They needed to appear married, but his concern was real. "Are you strong enough for this?" "I have to be." She squeezed his hands, then surprised him by pulling him closer. "We need to be convincing. The judge was right. They won't be easily fooled." "What are you suggesting?" "Move your things to the main bedroom. We share quarters starting now." The words hung heavy between them. Jonah searched her eyes. "Star, you don't have to." "I'm not offering what you think, but we need the appearance. Can you handle sleeping in the same room without—" She trailed off. "I've been sleeping on that couch for days. A floor with proper blankets would be luxury." She actually smiled at that, small but genuine. "Martha was right about you. You really are different." They spent the afternoon rehearsing not words, but movements. How to stand together naturally, how to touch without Star flinching, how to look at each other with something approximating affection. It was exhausting for Star, fighting against every instinct Marlowe had beaten into her. "I can't," she finally gasped after Jonah tried to put his arm around her waist. "When you touch me there, I feel his hands." "Then we don't do that," Jonah said immediately. "What about your shoulder? Is that safe?" She nodded, and they tried again. This time she managed to lean into him without trembling. Progress slow but real. As the sun began its descent, dust appeared on the horizon. Not just from the road, but from multiple directions they were being surrounded. "They're not taking chances," Tom observed grimly. "Neither are we," Star said. She'd changed into one of Martha's dresses, looking every inch the rancher's wife, except for the fierce determination in her eyes. "Remember, we're innocent homesteaders, nothing more." The inspection team arrived with military precision. Colonel Marcus Wells, a man with calculating eyes and silver temples, led them. Beside him rode a civilian inspector named Graves, whose pinched face suggested he'd never met a regulation he didn't love. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," Wells announced without dismounting. "By order of the territorial governor, this property is to be searched for contraband and evidence of criminal activity." "On what grounds?" Jonah demanded. "On the grounds that known fugitive Buck Marlowe claims you stole property and documents belonging to him." "Marlowe is a human trafficker," Rosa interjected. "His claims are worthless." "That's for the courts to decide," Graves said, finally dismounting. "We have a warrant. Stand aside." Soldiers flooded the property, searching with destructive efficiency. They overturned furniture, emptied drawers, tore apart hay bales. Star watched from the porch, Jonah's hand on her shoulder, a touch she'd initiated for appearance but found unexpectedly comforting. "Your men are destroying our home," she said to Wells, her voice steady despite her anger. "Regrettable but necessary," he replied. "Unless you'd prefer to simply turn over the documents now." "We don't have any documents." Wells studied her. "You're Apache. I'm Star Mercer, legal wife of Jonah Mercer. Marriages between whites and Indians are frowned upon, but not illegal," Rosa said firmly. "I have the statutes here if you'd like to review them." As the search continued, one soldier approached the barn with particular interest. Star tensed. The documents were hidden there. But Tom Calder suddenly appeared, blocking the path. "That's a sick horse in there, contagious, wouldn't go in without protection." "Stand aside, old man. Just trying to help. Don't blame me if your men catch something fatal." The soldier hesitated. Disease was a real fear on the frontier. That moment of hesitation was enough for Evan Pike to call out from another direction. Colonel found something. Everyone converged on Pike's location near the well. He held up a leather pouch, one of the decoys they'd prepared. "What is it?" Wells demanded. Pike opened it, revealing carefully aged papers that looked official but were actually old ranch receipts Star had doctored. "Looks like supply lists, hard to read." Graves snatched the papers, examining them with a magnifying glass. "These are worthless. Keep searching." As darkness fell, the soldiers lit torches, determined to continue. Star's ankle was agony, but she refused to show weakness. Jonah noticed anyway, subtly supporting more of her weight. "You need to rest," he murmured. "I need to stand. If I show weakness, they'll attack." A soldier emerged from the house carrying their marriage certificate. "Colonel, you should see this." Wells examined the document. "Married just days ago, rather convenient." "Love doesn't follow convenient timelines," Jonah said. "Prove it's love, then." Graves's smile was cruel. "Kiss your wife, Mr. Mercer. Show us this great romance." Starr felt Jonah tense beside her. This was different from the quick peck she'd given him before. This would need to be convincing. She turned to face him, seeing apology in his eyes. Then, gathering her courage, she reached up and touched his face, a gesture she'd never made before. "It's okay," she whispered. Jonah leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle, respectful, nothing like what she'd experienced with Marlowe. To her surprise, she found herself leaning into it, some part of her recognizing safety in Jonah's careful touch. When they parted, even Wells looked slightly uncomfortable. "Search the barn," he ordered gruffly. "Sir," the nervous soldier from before said, "there's supposedly a sick horse. I don't care if there's a plague in there. Search it." The soldiers entered the barn with lanterns. Starr held her breath, knowing the hidden compartment was good, but not perfect. They were tearing through everything, getting closer to the foundation. Then smoke began billowing from the structure. "Fire!" someone shouted. "The barn's on fire!" Chaos erupted. The horses inside, including Thunder, began screaming. Without thinking, Starr pulled free from Jonah and hobbled toward the barn. "Starr, no!" Jonah ran after her. She dodged his grasp and plunged into the smoke. The fire had started in the hay, likely a knocked-over lantern, and was spreading fast. Thunder was rearing in his stall, eyes rolling in terror. Working purely on instinct, Starr grabbed a blanket, threw it over Thunder's head, and began leading him out. Her broken ankle screamed with each step, but she pushed through. One by one, she led horses to safety while soldiers scrambled with water buckets. Jonah found her trying to save the last horse, barely able to stand. He swept her up in his arms just as a beam crashed down where she'd been standing. "The documents," she gasped as he carried her out, "are less important than your life." They emerged from the smoke to find the fire brigade formed Rosa, directing efforts with medical efficiency. The barn was saved, though damaged. The hidden compartment remained undiscovered, the fire actually aging its concealment. Wells approached them, his expression unreadable. "That was either very brave or very stupid, Mrs. Mercer. Those horses are our livelihood," she replied through gritted teeth. "And that's worth dying for. Some things are worth dying for, Colonel. Property, livelihood, freedom, truth." He studied her for a long moment. "Graves, have you found anything actionable?" The inspector looked frustrated. "No contraband, no stolen documents, just a ranch and a questionable marriage." "Which has been verified as legal," Rosa added firmly. Wells made a decision. "We're done here." He turned to his soldiers. "Pack up, we're leaving." "But sir," Graves protested, "surely there's more." "I said we're done. Whatever documents Marlowe claimed they had, they're not here." He looked meaningfully at Starr. "Or they're beyond our reach." As the soldiers prepared to leave, one young private approached Starr. "Ma'am, that was incredible, saving those horses. My family raises horses back in Ohio. They're not just animals, are they?" "No," Starr agreed softly. "They're family." The inspection team left, but Wells paused at the gate. "A word of advice, Mrs. Mercer. Other people will come looking, people less official than us. Be ready." After they were gone, everyone collapsed with exhaustion. Rosa tended to Starr's ankle, which had been damaged further by her heroics. Evan, Pike, and Tom worked to secure the barn. Jonah sat beside Starr on the porch. "Why did you risk everything for the horses?" "Because I needed to prove something." "What?" "That I could choose to run toward danger instead of away from it. That fear doesn't control me anymore." He took her hand carefully. "You've never been controlled by fear. You've been smart about danger. There's a difference." She looked at their joined hands. "When you kissed me tonight, it wasn't terrible." "High praise," he said with a slight smile. "I mean it. With Marlowe, every touch was violation. With you, it was safe, gentle, like you were asking permission even while doing it." "I was. I know, that's what made it bearable, maybe even nice." And they sat in comfortable silence until Rosa emerged. "I've given her something for the pain. She needs to sleep." Jonah carried Star to their room. Now truly their room, with his things moved in. He set her gently on the bed, then began arranging blankets on the floor for himself. "Jonah," he looked up, "the bed is big enough. You could sleep on top of the covers. On the other side, I think I'd feel safer knowing you were close." It was a huge step, and they both knew it. Jonah nodded, settling carefully on the far side of the bed, fully clothed and above the blankets. "Thank you," Star whispered in the darkness, "for everything, for waiting, for seeing me as more than broken." "You're not broken, Star. You're healing, and healing isn't a straight line." She was quiet so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. "Then Martha would be proud of you, of us, of what we're building." "What are we building?" "I don't know yet, but it feels important." Outside, storm clouds gathered again, but this time the approaching weather felt less like threat and more like cleansing. The documents were safe. The immediate danger had passed. And in a bed that had been empty for 3 years, 2 wounded souls were learning that proximity didn't have to mean danger. Star's breathing evened into sleep. Jonah stayed awake longer, standing guard, even in rest. Somewhere in the night, Star's hand found his across the space between them, not grasping, just touching a bridge of fingers in the darkness. The 30-day observation period was far from over. More inspectors would come. The documents still needed to reach authorities who could use them, and Star's healing, both physical and emotional, would take time neither of them could predict. But for tonight, they were safe. The barn still stood. The horses were alive. And trust, fragile as spring ice, was beginning to form between 2 people who'd thought themselves beyond saving. In the morning, there would be repairs to make wounds, to tend battles, to plan. But tonight, Star slept without nightmares for the first time since her capture, and Jonah learned that protecting someone could heal his own grief in ways he'd never expected. The storm broke just before dawn, not with violence, but with gentle rain washing the ash from the barn fire, feeding the earth, promising growth. Star woke to find Jonah already up, watching the sunrise from the window. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yes," he agreed, but he wasn't looking at the sunrise. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, a sensation she'd thought Marlowe had killed forever. "We have work to do today." "We do, but first breakfast, and Rosa needs to check your ankle. And then we figure out how to get those documents to someone who can use them without getting ourselves killed in the process." Star sat up, testing her ankle. The pain was manageable. "I have an idea about that, but you're not going to like it. Most of your ideas terrify me. They're also usually right. This one involves trusting someone we shouldn't trust. Who? Judge Caro. I think he's more afraid than corrupt, and fear can be redirected." Jonah considered this. "That's dangerous. Everything we do now is dangerous. But sometimes the riskiest path is the safest one, because no one expects you to take it." A knock at the door interrupted them. Tom's voice carried urgency. "Jonah, we've got visitors and you're going to want to see who it is." They made their way to the porch, Star leaning heavily on Jonah but determined to walk. In the yard, surrounded by armed Apache warriors, stood Naichi. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a white woman in expensive clothes, her bearing regal despite the dust of travel. She looked to be in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she was accustomed to getting her way. "But Mercer," the woman said, and it took Star a moment to realize she was being addressed. "My name is Elizabeth Thornton. I'm a journalist from Washington, and I believe you have a story that needs to be told." Elizabeth Thornton settled into Martha's old rocking chair on the porch, as if she owned it, her keen eyes taking in every detail of the ranch, the armed Apache warriors, and most especially the way Star and Jonah stood together close but not quite touching. "Your cousin Naichi contacted me through intermediaries," she explained, pulling out a leather notebook. "He said you have documents that could expose one of the largest government conspiracies in territorial history." "Why would a Washington journalist care about frontier corruption?" Jonah asked suspiciously. "Because this frontier corruption reaches all the way to Washington. Several senators have investments in the water rights being stolen from Apache lands." She leaned forward. "I can publish your story, but I need proof. And I need to hear it from you, Mrs. Mercer." Star straightened despite the pain in her ankle. "What guarantee do we have that you won't bury the story?" "None except my reputation. I exposed the Credit Mobilier scandal. I don't start fights I can't finish." Thornton pulled out a telegram. "This is from my editor. Full support for whatever I uncover here." Naichi spoke in Apache to Star, then switched to English. "She can be trusted. My scouts have watched her for days. She came alone, refused military escort." Before Star could respond, Tom Calder came running from his watch position. "Riders coming fast. It's the sheriff with a posse, and they look ready for war." "They're after the documents," Jonah said. "No," Star corrected, her face paling. "They're after me. Look." Sheriff Curtis was indeed approaching, but beside him rode someone Star had hoped never to see again. Marcus Whitmore, Buck Marlowe's business partner, a man whose cruelty made Marlowe look tame. "Inside, everyone," Jonah ordered, but Star stopped him. "No, we face this in the open. Mrs. Thornton needs to see everything." They arranged themselves on the porch, Star in a chair due to her ankle, Jonah standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The Apache warriors spread out, weapons visible but not raised. Elizabeth Thornton remained in her rocking chair, calmly taking notes. Curtis reined in at the porch steps. "Star Mercer, you're under arrest." "For what?" Rosa demanded, emerging from the house with her medical bag. "For the murder of Buck Marlowe. He died in custody last night, poison, and this woman had access to him during transport." "That's impossible," Jonah protested. "Star was here all night." Marcus Whitmore smiled coldly. "We have witnesses who say otherwise. Apache witnesses who saw her near the jail." Star understood immediately. They'd found Apache who could be bought or threatened. The testimony of Indians against an Indian woman would be believed even if it was lies. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth Thornton interjected, standing. "I'm documenting everything I see here, Sheriff. False arrest of an injured woman will make interesting reading in Washington." Curtis hesitated, but Whitmore pushed forward. "Stay out of this, woman. This is territorial business." "Murder is everyone's business," Thornton replied coolly, "as is justice, or the lack thereof." Evan Pike, who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "I was guarding Mrs. Mercer all night. She never left the ranch." "Your testimony is worthless, traitor," Whitmore snarled. "Maybe, but mine isn't." Judge Caro appeared from behind the barn where he'd apparently been waiting. "I've been investigating Marlowe's death. He was indeed poisoned, but not by Apache herbs. By strychnine, a white man's poison." "How do you know this?" Curtis demanded. "Because I found the bottle in Marcus Whitmore's saddlebags an hour ago when he stopped at my office to file charges." Caro pulled out a glass bottle, still half full. Whitmore went for his gun, but three things happened simultaneously. Jonah's rifle swung toward him, Naichi's arrow knocked the pistol from his hand, and Star, despite her broken ankle, stood and placed herself between Whitmore and Elizabeth Thornton. "You killed your own partner?" Star asked quietly. Whitmore's composure cracked. He was weak, ready to confess everything for a reduced sentence. The whole operation would have been exposed. "What operation?" Thornton asked, pencil flying across her notebook. "Shut up." Whitmore lunged toward Star, but Jonah caught him, throwing him to the ground with force that spoke of long-suppressed rage. "Touch her and you die," Jonah said simply. Curtis, looking overwhelmed, finally acted like a lawman. Marcus Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Buck Marlowe. You can't arrest me, I own half this territory. Not anymore, Caro said. He pulled out official documents. These arrived this morning, federal warrants for your arrest and the seizure of all assets pending investigation of fraud, conspiracy, and now murder. As Curtis's men took Whitmore away, his threats echoing across the ranch, Starr sank back into her chair. The pain in her ankle was nothing compared to the relief flooding through her. It's over, she whispered. Not quite, Elizabeth Thornton said. The documents, I need to see them. Starr looked at Jonah, who nodded. Together with Nietzsche and Tom's help, they retrieved the hidden papers from the Barnes Foundation. Thornton examined them with growing excitement. This is explosive. This proves systematic theft going back 20 years. Wars started for profit, treaties broken for gold. She looked at Starr. Your father died protecting these? Yes. Then we'll make sure his death meant something. Thornton stood. I need to telegraph my editor immediately. This story runs in 3 days nationally. But Starr, I need your personal account, not just the documents, but your story. Starr hesitated. Telling her story meant reliving it. But Jonah's hand found hers steady and supportive. I'll tell you everything, Starr said. But first, there's something else you need to know. I'm not just Apache. I have Mexican blood, Spanish blood, even some Scottish from a grandmother no one talks about. Marlowe didn't just try to own an Apache woman, he tried to own a human being who represents everything this frontier could be. Thornton's eyes lit up. A living symbol of integration. Yes, that's the angle, not just corruption exposed, but humanity defended. They spent the next hours with Starr telling her story from the raid on her village, through her captivity rescue and marriage. Thornton was a skilled interviewer, gentle when Starr struggled, pressing when she sensed there was more. When Starr reached the part about Jonah's patience, his promise to wait, she stopped. I need to say something to him first. Privately. Everyone dispersed, giving them space. Starr turned to Jonah, really looking at him for the first time without fear clouding her vision. You saved me, she said. You saved yourself. No, listen, you saved me not by riding in like some hero, but by seeing me as human when I'd forgotten I was, by waiting, by being patient when patience seemed impossible. Starr. She placed her fingers on his lips, stopping him. The gesture was intimate, voluntary, unprecedented. I need to tell you something. When Marlowe had me, I promised myself I'd never let another man touch me. Never trust, never love, never feel anything but survivor's necessity. Jonah stayed perfectly still, afraid to break this moment. But you're not another man. You're Jonah, the man who put food at a safe distance, who taught thunder to trust again while showing me I could too, who married me for protection but never demanded payment. I never would. I know, that's why I can say this. She took a breath. I love you. The words hung between them like morning mist, delicate and profound. Jonah's eyes widened, but he didn't move, still letting her control the moment. You don't have to love me back, Starr continued. You loved Martha, and that's... I loved Martha, Jonah interrupted gently. Loved. Past tense, but I love you. Present tense. Different love, but no less real. Starr studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. Even broken as I am, you're not broken. You're like those Japanese bowls Rosa told me about, broken once but put back together with gold in the cracks. More beautiful for having been shattered. For the first time since her capture, Starr initiated full contact. She stepped into Jonah's arms, laying her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. He held her carefully like she was precious and might flee. I want to be your wife, she whispered. Really, your wife. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, when the nightmares stop, when I can give you all of me, not just the pieces that still work. There's no rush, we have time. Dewey, your 30 days are almost up. The judge could still annul. Actually, Judge Caro said, appearing with impeccable timing, I'm prepared to make my ruling now. Everyone gathered again. Caro stood formally as if in a courtroom. In the matter of this marriage between Jonah Mercer and Star Mercer, formerly Tallulah Nez, I find the union to be legal, genuine, and binding. No annulment will be granted. On what grounds? Star asked. On the grounds that I've watched you both for weeks. The marriage may have started as protection, but it's become real. The way you move to protect each other during the fire, the way you look at each other when you think no one's watching, the way you've both changed since meeting. He smiled, the first warm expression they'd seen from him. Also, Elizabeth Thornton's article is going to make you both famous. I'd rather be remembered as the judge who upheld love than the one who destroyed it. Nietzsche stepped forward. The Apache Nation recognizes this union. Star remains Apache, but she also becomes a bridge. Her children will belong to both worlds. Children? Star looked startled. Rosa laughed. Eventually, when you're ready, no rush. Elizabeth Thornton closed her notebook with satisfaction. I have everything I need. This story will change things. Maybe not everything, maybe not immediately, but it's a start. She prepared to leave, but Star stopped her. Why did you really come? It wasn't just for a story. Thornton's professional mask slipped. I had a daughter once, taken by raiders, never recovered. I couldn't save her, but I can save others by exposing the men who profit from suffering. She touched Star's cheek gently. Be happy, child. It's the best revenge against those who tried to break you. As Thornton's carriage departed, the ranch felt suddenly quiet. The Apache warriors prepared to leave as well, their protection no longer needed. Nietzsche embraced Star formally. You are still Apache, always, but you are also more now. Come visit when you can. I will, and Nietzsche, thank you for everything. He nodded, then surprised everyone by offering his hand to Jonah. Take care of her, white man. She is precious to our people. She's precious to me too. I know, that's the only reason you still breathe. Despite the threat, there was warmth in its acceptance. The Apache rode away, leaving dust and hope in their wake. That evening, as the sun set on what had been the longest day of revelations, Star and Jonah found themselves alone on the porch. Her ankle was propped up, healing, but still painful. The ranch stretched before them, scarred by the recent battles, but still standing. What now? Star asked. Now we live. We rebuild the barn properly. We raise horses. We help other women escape men like Marlowe. An underground railroad for abused women. Why not? We have the ranch, the connections now, and soon we'll have the credibility from Thornton's article. Star considered this. Martha would have liked that. Using her home to save others. Yes, she would have. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged overhead. Then Star stood, testing her ankle. Where are you going? To our room, to our bed. She held out her hand. Will you come with me? Star, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Not for what you might think, I'm not ready for that. But I want to sleep beside you, really beside you, under the same covers, feeling safe. Jonah took her hand, and together they walked inside. The house that had echoed with loneliness for 3 years now felt full of possibility. In their room, they prepared for bed with the awkwardness of new lovers who weren't yet lovers. Star changed behind a screen while Jonah turned away. When she emerged in a nightgown of Martha's that Rosa had altered, Jonah's breath caught. You're beautiful. I'm scarred. So am I, inside and out. Doesn't make either of us less beautiful. They lay down together under the same blankets this time. Star curled against Jonah's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her carefully. It was the most intimate they'd been, and both trembled with the significance. I'm scared, Star admitted in the darkness. Of what? Of being happy, of believing this is real, of waking up back in Marlowe's chains. Then I'll remind you every morning that you're free, that you're loved, that you're home. every morning, for as long as you need to hear it." Star lifted her head, looking at him in the moonlight. "What if that's forever? Then forever it is." She kissed him, then different from before. Not performance, not fear, but genuine desire to connect. When they parted, both were breathless. "I love you, Jonah Mercer. And I love you, Star Mercer." Outside, a wolf howled, not threatening but wild and free. Star listened, then smiled. "That's how I feel. Like I've been caged so long I forgot I could howl." "Then howl. This ranch is big enough for all your wild." She laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. It transformed her face, showing the girl she'd been before trauma, the woman she could become with healing. They fell asleep, intertwined, two souls, finding peace in each other. The 30-day observation was over. The threats were ended. The documents would soon expose the truth to the world. But more importantly, trust had grown into love. Protection had become partnership, and a marriage that began as legal fiction had transformed into beautiful truth. Weeks later, Elizabeth Thornton's article shook the nation. The Apache bride who exposed an empire of lies ran in every major newspaper. The water rights were returned to Apache control. Several government officials resigned in disgrace. Laws were changed to protect Native women from trafficking. Star and Jonah became reluctant celebrities, their ranch a symbol of what America could be: integrated, compassionate, just. They did establish that underground railroad for abused women, saving dozens over the years. But the night that mattered most was months later, when Star finally felt ready to be fully Jonah's wife. It wasn't dramatic or fraught, just two people who'd waited for each other, who'd built trust brick by brick, finally completing their union. Their first child, a daughter, was born the following spring. They named her Hope Martha Mercer, and she had her mother's fierce spirit and her father's patient heart. Years later, when their hair had grayed and their children had children, people would still come to hear their story. Star would tell it simply: "I was enslaved by cruel men, but I was saved by a patient one, not through force or drama, but through five simple words: I'll wait until you're ready." And he did. The barn that wouldn't breathe that first terrified night became a schoolhouse where children of all races learned together. The ranch that had been built on loneliness became a beacon of community. And two broken people proved that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of patience and respect. When Star finally passed at 93, Jonah following just days later, they were buried beneath the oak tree next to Ash. Their headstone bore a simple inscription: "They waited, they loved, they lived." The wind still carries their story across the New Mexico plains, a reminder that love isn't possession, that healing happens on its own schedule, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply seeing someone's humanity when the world insists they have none.